to video class with Nigel Short and me, Carol Vorderman. In this video, we'll take you through all the basics that you'll ever need to know to play the game of chess. Like me, perhaps you used to play chess and know some of the moves, but can't remember all of the rules and want to play better chess. Or perhaps you've never played before. Either way, this video can help you. We're going to look at the orientation of the board, where the various pieces are placed, and show you how each piece moves. We'll then go on to show you how to plan ahead and think strategically about your game. Well now, let's meet Nigel Short. Nigel, hello.
Hello.
Now, it's true that people can learn to play chess at any age, can't they?
That's right. I began playing chess at the age of 5. I was very interested in chess at that age, but it wasn't until 2 years later that I began to, I joined a chess club and began to play in some tournaments.
So how old were you when you became a Grandmaster?
I was 19, and that was in 1984. At that time, I was the youngest Grandmaster in the world, but since then, Grandmasters have become very much younger. For instance, the Hungarian player Judith Polgar became a Grandmaster at the age of 15.
Goodness me. Well, we're not going to go quite up to Grandmaster level in this video, in fact nowhere near. But really, with the things that we're going to cover, people really can improve their game, can't they?
That's right. I think if you learn a few basic tactics, you can go a very long way. We need to consider the board and the pieces. Now, obviously you should choose these very carefully. If the squares on the board are too small, then you will find it more difficult to pick the pieces up. So a good sized board will have squares about 5 centimetres across. And boards can range from folding cardboard ones to heavy solid wooden ones. When choosing pieces to go with the board, the diameter of the base of the largest piece should be about 3/4 of the width of the square. A set of pieces with kings about 10 centimetres tall are suited to a board with 5 centimetre wide squares. The most widely recognised shape of chessmen are known as the Staunton pieces. They look like this.
So what's the first rule we need to remember?
Well, when you are setting up the board, you must remember white to the right. By that I mean when we put the board on the table, and the white square should be in the right-hand corner, and that is true for both players.
Now, there are special words to describe the different ways of moving across the board. Can you go through those with us?
First of all, we have the ranks. Those are the rows running from side to side. So here is an example of the queen moving along a rank.
And there are 8 ranks?
8 ranks in all.
Okay.
And next we have the files. These are the rows going up and down the board. So this is a queen moving up and down a file.
So there are 8 ranks and 8 files.
Yes. And finally we have the diagonals. Those are the paths running across the corners of the squares. So this is the queen moving along a diagonal.
And the diagonals can be black diagonals and white diagonals.
Exactly.
Well, now shall we look at the pieces?
The chess pieces are black and white. White moves first to start the game, and you can decide who should have the white pieces by tossing a coin.
So how do you win a game of chess? What's the determining factor?
Well, to win you have to get your opponent's king in such a position that it is directly attacked and trapped, so that it cannot avoid being captured. This is known as checkmate, but we'll be talking about that later on.
Okay. Now, is it necessary to take all of your opponent's pieces to win?
No, not at all. It doesn't matter how many pieces you have taken. All that counts is checkmating the king.
All right. How many different pieces are there on a board?
Well, there's 6 different pieces. There's the king, queen, rook, bishop, knight and pawn. It's not compulsory to take an opponent's piece when it's possible to do so. If you decide to take a piece in chess, you take a piece on the same square, like this. The queen comes down, captures the pawn. The queen then takes control of that square.
Let's see how to set up a board at the beginning of a game.
In total, each player has 16 pieces. You have a king, a queen, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, and 8 pawns. The queen is always placed on her own colour in the centre of the first rank. This means that the white queen and the black queen are opposite each other on the board. In the centre of the first rank, we also have the king, so the king stands next to the queen, like this, and the white king is on a black square. Either side of the king and queen, we have the bishops, followed by the 2 knights. And then in the corners of the board, we have the rooks. In front of all your main pieces, you then have a row of 8 pawns, like this. Let's now look at what's known as the king side and the queen side. For the white pieces, the king side is to the right of the king, and the queen side is to the left of the queen.
So for black, the king's side is to the left of the king and the queen's side is to the right of the queen.
This helps us to describe the pieces on the board, and it also helps us to describe some of the moves. So to recap, each side has 1 king, 1 queen, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks and 8 pawns. And the queen stands in the middle of the first rank on her own colour.
Can we now go on to see how each piece is allowed to move?
Yes, okay, let's go to the table. The king is the most valuable piece. When your king is checkmated, you lose the game, so it must be protected at all times. King has limited mobility. You can move 1 square in any direction, so it can move to any of these 8 highlighted squares, unless, of course, the squares can be attacked by the opposition.
Well, if I have a rook here, then this rook, as we'll see later, can attack these 2 squares and also these 2. So the king can't move there, can he?
That's right, but white does have the option of taking the rook, like this. Here's another position where the white's king's movements are limited by his own pieces here. The king can only move in the corner or to the side, but at least in this situation the king is extremely well protected. The queen. The queen can move horizontally or vertically, like this, and it can also move along the diagonals, any direction. In the centre of the board, the queen is a very powerful piece and can cover 27 squares. On the side of the board, or in the corner, it only covers 21 squares.
Okay, well, let's put in a couple of pieces, white pieces. How would these pieces affect the movement of the queen?
Well, those pieces would hamper in the movement of the queen, because the queen would not be able to move to either of these squares, nor indeed would it be able to capture its own piece. And similarly with the bishop here, the queen would not be able to come over, nor could it take its own piece.
What about if I introduced my big black knight here? Now this is on a diagonal leading from the queen. How does that affect the movement of the queen?
Well, again, I can't hop over the knight, but in this case I can simply capture it. So, of course, the queen is the most powerful attacking piece, and you should look after it very carefully indeed.
Let's look at the rook next, shall we?
Each player has 2 rooks. The rook is the second most powerful piece on the board and can move along the ranks like this, or up and down the files. However, unlike the queen, the rook cannot move diagonally. It also cannot hop over pieces, so in this situation the rook cannot move to either of these 2 squares here.
And what if I introduce my piece here? How does that affect the rook?
Well, again, the rook cannot go past the knight, but it has the option of capturing the knight like this.
Thank you, Nigel.
The bishop can only move along the diagonals on one or more squares, like this, or backwards. Each side has two bishops, one on a black square, one on a white square. The black square bishop can control all the black squares on the board, and the white square bishop can cover all the white squares. So working together, these two make a very efficient and effective team. In this situation, the path of the black bishop is blocked by the pawn here, and the bishop can only move to these two squares.
But what if that pawn is white? How does that affect the bishop?
Well, if the pawn is white, then the bishop can still make any of the two moves as in the previous situation, but it can also capture the pawn like this. So you end up with this result. The pawn is eliminated from the game, and the bishop now sits on the square, originally occupied by the pawn, and the bishop can now cover a much wider range of squares on its next move. The knight moves in an L shape. The knight moves two squares, either horizontally or vertically, and then one to the side. So in this situation, the white knight can capture any of the 8 black pawns here, just like this.
OK, well let's imagine that there are some other pieces on the board. Do they block the knight's movement?
No, they don't block it in any way, because the knight is the only piece that is permitted to jump over the other pieces to reach its arrival square. So it can still make a capture like this, or like this. The pawn is the lowest value piece on the board, and when you are a beginner, pawns may seem to be a bit of a nuisance, especially since you have 8 of them. But as your game progresses, then you will appreciate the powers of the pawn. Unlike the other pieces, however, the pawn may never retreat. The pawn can only move straight ahead, one square at a time, towards the opponent's end rank, and it never moves backwards. When a pawn reaches the end rank, as part of the same move, it must be exchanged for a piece of its own colour, either a queen, rook, bishop or knight, but not another king. This is known as promoting a pawn.
Now you've just promoted the pawn to a queen. Is it always best to promote to a queen?
In a few cases, it can be better to under-promote the pawn. That is, when a piece of less value than the queen is chosen, perhaps a knight. But this is less common, although I have promoted it to a knight on a number of occasions. You can exchange a pawn for a queen even if you already have a queen. Theoretically, you could end up with a maximum of 9 queens, but remember, the object of the game is to deliver checkmate, not to collect queens or other pieces. If you have 2 queens or more, then you can make your new queen by either inverting a rook, like this, or by marking a pawn in some other way.
So can you show me now how a pawn could capture a piece?
A pawn normally moves 1 square straight ahead, but when taking an opponent's piece, it moves 1 square diagonally. So in this situation, the white pawn can either take this black pawn here, or the black rook here. Once a pawn has taken a piece by moving diagonally into the adjacent file, it advances forward in this new file, like this. Alternatively, the pawn could simply ignore both of the pieces and choose to advance forward. If we move these pawns forward 1 square at a time, we now find that they're facing each other. Now they block each other's path because, as we've just seen, pawns only move diagonally when taking a piece. When the game first started, pawns were only allowed to move 1 square at a time. But a few centuries ago, in order to speed the game up, a rule was introduced allowing a player to move a pawn forward 2 squares on its first move, like this.
So the black pawn can also move 1 or 2 squares forward on its first move.
Yes, exactly. Now, look at this situation. If this black pawn is moved 2 squares on its first move, it lands adjacent and parallel with the white pawn, and it would appear that the black pawn has managed to avoid capture by the white pawn. In order not to let the black pawn get away with this, the white pawn can take the black pawn as if it had only moved 1 square. To take the black pawn in a situation like this, the white pawn must take the black pawn on the next move. This move is called en passant.
So the en passant rule allows the attacking pawn, in this case white, to take the double moving opponent pawn as if it had only moved 1 square.
Yes, but remember that the en passant rule can only be done at this time. One peculiar thing about en passant is that only a pawn and no other pieces can capture a pawn en passant. The modern game allows castling as another way to speed the game up. These 2 squares here must be empty for castling. Castling is where the king is moved 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook jumps over to the square immediately beside it. This move is called kingside castling. Alternatively, you could castle with the rook on the other side of the board, the queenside rook. These 3 squares here must be empty for queenside castling. Again, the king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook jumps over the king.
So why would we use the castling rule?
Well, the centre is where the main struggle usually takes place, so it is normally better to get the king to safety at the side of the board and to bring the rook into a strong central position.
So are there any rules for castling?
Yes, the rules are that the king and the rook that the king castles with mustn't have been moved previously. Another rule is that the king cannot castle out of check, cannot castle into check, or cannot castle over a square which is guarded by an opponent's piece. In this situation, the white king cannot castle on this side, the queen's side, because it would have been castling over this square, which is guarded by the black bishop. It would be possible for the king to castle on the king's side, however, because it is not moving over a guarded square. Similarly, if the bishop were on this square, the king couldn't castle on this side because it would be moving into check when it landed on this square.
Can you explain to me exactly what check is?
When your king is directly attacked by an enemy piece, we say that it is in check and you must escape from it immediately. There are several possible ways of doing that. Take a look at this position. The white queen has just moved to the centre of the board, giving check to black's king. There are 3 possible ways to get out of check. The king could move out of the way, like this, or alternatively, the bishop could block the check. Or by far the best, the knight could simply take the queen. Remember that one king cannot check another. That is, they cannot move onto adjacent squares, and you cannot move the king into check. Okay, now we know that the king is the most important piece, and if we lose it, we lose the game. So we must guard it very carefully.
So let's take a look at a very basic checkmating position.
Have a look at this. The white queen moves down the board, putting the black king in check. The king has no legal move with which to get out of check. The king cannot move up the board because it would be on an adjacent square to white's king, and if it moves sideways then it is still in check from the white queen. So this position is actually checkmate and black loses. White has 3 other moves with which to put black in checkmate. Can you spot them?
Can I spot them? Well, if the queen could go here because it can move along a diagonal, so the same situation arises again.
That's right.
Or the queen could move along this rank all the way along to here. So the king can't move here or here, and he can't take the queen.
Most importantly.
Because this white king would then take him. And likewise, the queen can move here, and exactly the same situation arises. The king can't take the queen again.
That's excellent. One of the most difficult basic aspects of chess is to learn how to checkmate your opponent with only a few of your pieces on the board. And you'll need to have lots of practice at this.
All right, well, let's start with some practice. Let's take this situation where I only have my king left, but you have your king in a corner square, a queen and a rook. What would you do then?
In this position, I would try and drive your king to the side of the board where it has fewer options, and then give checkmate.
Okay.
So I would start by giving check here.
So I have to move out of this file.
That's
I
right.
can't move into this one because the rook is covering that, so I have to move consequently over there.
Yes, and then I give a check.
And the same happens again, the two files are covered.
I give another check.
Right, I'll move there.
That's right, and then finally the rook comes down, and that's checkmate.
Now I can't take the rook, can I? Because you could take it with the queen.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, let's look at another situation where I only have the king again. This time you have your king, the queen, and a bishop.
Well, it's the same principle. Again, you must drive the king to the side of the board. So here I would start by giving this check.
I'll move here, because I'm moving out of check.
And I'll bring the queen closer to you. Give another
I'll
check.
move here.
And finally, checkmate here. With the queen and the bishop working very effectively on the diagonals.
Right. Well, what about this situation? I have the king, black king. You only have your king and one other piece, let's say the queen.
Again, I must try and drive the king to the side of the board. So I would start with this move.
I'll go here.
I'll keep you pinned on the back rank.
I'll go, that's the only place I can go. Again, I'll go here.
Yes. And now, having brought up the king to support the queen, I'm able to give checkmate here.
So I can't take the queen
Because it's protected. Yeah.
Okay. The next situation, if I have my king and you have your king and two rooks.
Well, first I cut off the king and then I drive it to the back and give checkmate. So I come here.
So I can't move into this rank. I'll go towards your rook.
It's a good defence. I give a check.
And now this time you're covering both ranks,
Both ranks.
so I'll move again towards your rook.
And now I need to swing my rook over to the other side.
Okay, I shall move along towards you.
I give a check.
And this time I can only go
You must
onto
go
this
to
rank.
You must go to the back rank and checkmate again.
All right. I'm going to make it more difficult for you this time, Nigel.
I hope so.
This time, I'll have my black king, you'll have your king and just one rook.
Yes. In the examples we had earlier, the white had a massive material superiority. However, in this case, I don't have such a big material advantage, so I must use my own king very actively in driving back your king. So here I would start by giving a check.
This means that I can't move into any square adjacent to your king, and I have to move out of this file, so I shall go over there.
That's right. And I bring my king closer to your king by moving here.
Okay, I'll go there.
If you move up, then you will allow me to give checkmate here. Perhaps it is slightly better to come into the corner,
Yes.
and I will proceed to drive you into the corner.
And again.
And now you are forced to bring the king opposite to mine and then checkmate.
Fine.
If you practice these situations, checkmate will seem easier to reach. Many players remember previous situations and know how to react immediately.
So how do we record the game on a piece of paper?
Well, there are a couple of methods, but the only internationally accepted method is the algebraic notation, which fortunately is the easiest to follow. The ranks are numbered from 1 up to 8, and the files from A to H. So the square A1 is in the bottom left-hand side from White's viewpoint. Each piece is then given a capital letter. There's K for king, Q for queen, R for the rook, B is for bishop, and N is for knight, to avoid confusion with the king, and P is for pawn. When each piece is drawn on a diagram, they'll look something like this. So each square has a coordinate, as in battleships or on a map. So you would say that this pawn was on E2.
But how do you describe the movement of any piece or pawn?
Well, let's have a look at White's first pawn move. When a pawn moves, only the arrival square is written. So if the pawn is moved from D2 to D4, that is written as D4. And that's what you see in most chess books and newspapers. The blacks may then move a knight from G8 to F6. This is written as NF6. So the first move of the game can be written like this: 1, D4, NF6. The white move is always written first.
All right, so now we know how movement is recorded, but how do you show if and when a piece is captured?
This 9bxf3 means that in the ninth move, the white bishop has made a capture on the square f3. When a pawn captures a piece, the pawn's file name is written first, so that cxd4 means that a c-file pawn has captured the piece on the adjacent d file.
All right, well, what's the notation for castling?
Well, kingside castling is written as 0-0 and queenside castling as 0-0-0.
Well, obviously it's very important for any new player to learn this notation. There are quite a lot of symbols to learn. Are there special symbols for check and checkmate?
A plus sign shows that it's check, and that's written after the move. And checkmate can be shown by simply writing mate after the move. First, let me explain the values for each piece. That is, each piece has a numerical value which can be approximated to its strength in the game.
Well, let's look at one piece at a time, and let's start with the king.
Now, the king is the exception, and it isn't given a numerical value because the king is everything and the whole game depends upon its survival. So if you lose the king, that's it. The queen has the highest numerical value of 9 points. The rook has a value of 5 points, the bishop 3 points, and the knight also 3 points. The pawn is the piece of the lowest value on the board and is worth only 1 point. We can use these values to see when the exchange of your men is to your advantage. That is it worth losing my knight if I can capture your queen? Sometimes these values don't apply in certain situations.
What sort of situations do you mean?
Well, a pawn which has nearly reached the far side of the board is worth more than one which hasn't moved. Or you may decide to sacrifice your queen if it means checkmating the opposition with another piece. So the point system can only be used as a guide, but you should take other factors into account too before making your decision about relative values. These other factors may be the position of your pieces on the board or the end result of a sacrifice.
After studying all the things that we have done so far, are we now ready to play a game?
Yes, that's all you need to learn, And the most important thing is to find an opponent and to begin.
All right then. Thank you.
Let's play a game. We've already set up the pieces, so perhaps we should toss a coin to see who will be white.
Okay. I'll call heads.
Tails, you lose. I start.
Checkmate, Nigel. Actually, I did cheat a little bit there, because those were a few moves which Nigel did show me beforehand.
That was fool's mate. The white king is in check, and he can't escape, nor can the check be blocked. So we reach checkmate in only 2 moves. Let's look at those moves again.
Okay.
When I move these pawns forward like this, I opened up a path of squares which wasn't covered by any of my pieces. It was a sitting duck, really. As you've just seen, it's a bad idea to move your pawns aimlessly at the edge of the board. If you do, this will greatly weaken your defence. When you moved a black centre pawn, this was a good move. A move like this allows the queen and the bishop to get out. But it doesn't expose the black king. This is an example of opening up the diagonals.
Within Fool's Mate, we've seen a couple of good moves and also some pretty appalling moves. Are there any other ways in which to reach checkmate in just a few moves?
Yes, let's have a look at Scholar's Mate. This is quite often attempted by beginners, so it's good to recognise it and know how to meet it. So I open e4, and Carol, you play e5.
Yeah.
And bring out the bishop here to c4, and Carol, you play bishop to c5.
Like that.
Now, I bring out the queen here, attacking 2 pawns at once. Pawn e5 and the one on f7. And let's suppose that black only sees one of the threats and moves out the knight to defend the advanced e-pawn.
So the knight goes to c6.
6, that's right. But then the queen comes down to f7, takes the pawn and delivers checkmate.
Now that's checkmate because I can't take the queen as the queen is protected by the white bishop.
That's right.
Now how could I have avoided that disaster?
Well, quite simply, I think. Instead of bringing out this knight here to c6, you could bring the queen to e7, defending both of these pawns here. Now, of course, white can still capture the pawn on f7 with check, and the queen takes the queen. Bishop comes down, and the king takes the bishop. Now, at the end of this, black has emerged with a material advantage. It's taken a queen and a bishop, whereas white has only captured a queen and a pawn.
Obviously, opening moves are terribly important. Are there any opening moves which we can use to avoid Scholar's Mate?
Certainly, there are lots of options. For example, when I open e4, you don't have to advance your pawn 2 squares. You could play e6, the French defence, instead. And then if I would continue occupying the centre, you would strike back with d5. This is a good opening. I've used this myself many times. But if we go back, we can see some other openings. For example, after e4, c5, which is the Sicilian defence. This is Garry Kasparov's favourite opening. And this is a good opening because it puts pressure on the centre squares here.
Other than Fool's Mate and Scholar's Mate, are there any other types of mate that we should know about?
Of course. Let me show you something else that can happen when you are learning to play. It's called stalemate. Stalemate happens when the player whose turn it is to move is not in check, but has no legal move left. The situation can arise at the end of a game when you are trying to finish off your opponent. Let's take a look at this position. Here, white is winning. As we have seen already, it is not too difficult to checkmate with a king and queen against a lone king. Here, white may simply play checkmate. However, if white is careless and instead plays his queen here, then black's king is not in check, yet he has no legal move. The situation is known as stalemate, and the game is drawn. A disaster from white's point of view, and a lucky escape for black.
Okay. Are there any other ways in which a game can be drawn?
Yes, if the position is repeated 3 times, the game is drawn. Or it can be drawn by continuous checking. Let's look at this position. It seems that white is in terrible trouble. He's threatened with checkmate here and checkmate here. He's much material down. But in fact, white can save the game in the following way, by giving a check.
Now, I can't move my king to any of these 3 squares, so I'd have to go there. So
To the
let's
side.
say or here.
And then I give a check to the side,
Again, I'd have to move back into this file.
and I check again. You come over, and I check. And as you see, black's king can't escape from the barrage of checks, so the game is drawn. And this is known as perpetual check. Though, in fact, most master games are often drawn by agreement, and that is when master players consider that there is no prospect to win the game. Or, sometimes, I'm afraid to say, is when both players are in a sharp position and they are scared of losing.
Nigel, let's talk a little about some tactics and strategies. Earlier you explained how each piece has a certain value. Can we look first of all at some different types of exchanges of material?
Yes, in this position there are a number of different options available for white. For instance, you can capture this pawn worth 1 point.
And
With the
I would
bishop.
capture the bishop.
And that's 3 points, so that's obviously bad for white.
Mm-hmm.
I could also, for instance, take the bishop here with the rook. That's 3 points.
And I'd take the rook, which is 5 points.
So again, that would be a mistake for the white player.
Okay.
But I do have one very good option, and that is simply to capture this rook with my knight. 5 points.
And then I capture the knight with my pawn.
3 points, and that's excellent.
Let's have a look at how you might decide to sacrifice, let's say, a queen for a piece of lower value, if you can force checkmate.
Yes. White can win the game very quickly here by bringing down his queen in front of the king.
And that's the sacrifice.
That's
because
the sacrifice, because now you're forced to take the queen, and then white swings over the rook to the h file, giving check. The king can't escape, so it's checkmate.
Can we look at some other tactics and strategies which can help us with our play?
Sure. I can show you a game I played a few decades ago, which illustrates quite well some of the things we've been talking about.
Now, do you always play that same opening move?
I almost always do, but there are plenty of other good moves. For example, d4, c4, or knight f3. All of them, in their own way, trying to control the centre.
Okay, so you have e4 and I shall move there.
c5, the Sicilian defence. Bring out the knight, developing a piece, and developing a bishop.
Now I'll bring the queen out to threaten your bishop.
Yes, it's often a good idea to keep your queen at home in the early part of the game, because the queen can be exposed to attack. So here, to save time, I took the knight. 3 points.
I take the bishop, and that's a fair exchange because they're both worth 3 points.
Exactly. Castling.
Now, is it important to castle early on in the game?
Yes, it's very important because it brings the king into safety.
Okay.
I developed another piece.
Why is it so important to control the centre, Nigel?
Well, it enables your pieces to move much more freely. Yes, that was a good move by black, also enabling the bishop to come out. Exchange. And bringing out the bishop to an aggressive square.
Now I'll take the knight.
Yes, and he took the bishop. And here black took a very hot pawn in the centre of the board. So he's material up, one pawn ahead, but black is neglecting the development and his king is very exposed. Move my queen to the side, protecting the bishop. Black developed, and I attack the queen with a gain of time.
So I move the queen right over to here.
Over to the side. And make an aggressive move, attacking the pawn on c5, but more importantly, putting pressure against the e7 point.
I'll bring my queen back here to defend the pawn.
And now the knight moves to a very aggressive square in the centre of the board, attacking the queen.
So the queen is pulled back and retreats.
Retreat. Now, I also made a retreat to c4, but this is an attacking retreat, because from here the knight threatens to jump in to d6, where it will give check, forking the king and the queen.
Bring the bishop back again to protect the king.
Yes, blocking the e-file. Queen comes up, attacking the rook.
And again I'll block.
Developing a piece, blocking that threat. Brought in the knight, check, and this is a diversionary sacrifice. Knight is captured, and I capture the knight on f6.
The rook's now exposed, so I'll bring him along here.
And I schnop off a pawn, threatening to give checkmate in the next move.
Okay, so I'll bring in my queen to here.
And brought the rook into the centre of the board, protecting the bishop and threatening a lethal exposure on the black queen. In this situation, with the black king hopelessly caught in the centre of the board, and his development lagging, and threatened with checkmate in 4 or 5 moves, my opponent decided to resign.
Well done.
Thank you.
So what tactical skills should we learn and practice?
Well, there are 3 main tactical motifs: the fork, the skewer, and the pin. This one here is a fork. White knight, as we see, gives check to the black king. The king must move somewhere, and then the queen is taken.
Now this is called a fork from the original position because it's a two-pronged attack in effect.
That's right, but it needn't be only a 2-pronged attack. You could even have a 3-pronged attack, as in this situation. This is known as a family fork.
A family fork, all right. And the next one you say is the skewer.
Yes, well, here all the pieces are on the same line. The black king is in check. It's obliged to move out of the way. And the piece behind, in this case the queen, is lost.
Now, the skewer, do they always have to be on the same line?
That's right, they do.
And the piece of highest value is in the centre?
That's exactly right.
All right.
Okay. The other motif is the pin. And this is a very, very common tactical motif, so it's important to remember this. Here is an example, and the white rook attacks the black bishop in the centre of the board, but the bishop cannot move out of the way because that would be check. So in this case, the bishop is lost.
And you would say the bishop is pinned to the king.
Yes.
And the piece of highest value is
the king.
Is the king.
Yes. I'll show you a game I played in 1987 with black against the beast from Baku, Garry Kasparov. Okay, so why don't you take the white pieces?
Okay. So I'll play Kasparov's moves.
Yes.
White to go first.
That's right. And a classical response. Develop the bishop. Knight moves attacking the bishop. So I would retreat.
Bring out another pawn.
And advance the pawn, hitting the knight.
So he comes back to exactly the same position.
That's right. And bring up a pawn to support my centre.
Now he brings this pawn up. Why would he do that?
Well, he wants to bring his bishop to this square and then castle, bringing his king to safety.
As you say, the bishop comes out.
Yes. No. Both sides here developing their pieces.
So king's side castling.
And I did likewise.
Now the queen comes out.
This is attacking the bishop. Decided to defend it, the pawn. And now I exchanged for the knight. And the pawn recaptured.
So that's a fair exchange.
Fair exchange, yes. Knight is developed.
So knight's brought over here.
Yes. This looks a slightly paradoxical move because it blocks in the own bishop, but it supports an advance with e4 in the centre, attacking the queen.
So the queen retreats.
And I brought back my bishop,
And as you say,
anticipating this advance in the centre. And then I prophylactically retreated my bishop to f7, bolstering the centre.
brings the rook
The
across.
rook on a semi-open file, attacking pawn, b7, and I defend. Queen comes across, attacking the pawn, and I advance, defending the pawn.
Now he decides to
Exchange in the centre, and I retake. Queen
now moves
moves
to
again.
threaten
This is
this.
threatening this pawn, and hence my response. He brings the rook into the game, and I bring rook over with a double attack on the c pawn.
And this rook now comes up here. So
Yes.
that's being threatened by the queen.
But it's well protected.
Protected by
And
the
he's
pawn.
blocked the attack on the. Bring the knight over, attacking the rook, and it comes back to b2 this time.
Right.
And I brought my knight back. This is a tacit offer of a draw, because if Kasparov would repeat with rook b4, I could repeat the position and we would have a draw by repetition of position.
Okay.
But instead he chose to continue by bringing his rook over to c2.
To c2.
Bring my knight into b6 to occupy this weak square.
So he decides to come over to this side of the board.
That's right. I played a probably inaccurate move, preparing to double my rooks down here. And he brings the bishop in. I chose to defend.
And then the rook comes over here again.
Yes, that's right. I bring in the knight. The rook advances. Again, very well protected. Queen comes back.
And I decide to exchange the knight.
Yes. Rook captures, threatening the pawn, and so the bishop defends. Queen comes out, supporting both this point and this point.
He advances.
E5. We've got a very blocked position here. There are chances for both sides.
So the bishop now comes back.
Yes, because it no longer has any function on this diagonal. And I brought my bishop to a more active diagonal.
He decides to bring the queen
to sideways to e3. I decided to sacrifice an exchange because I gain control of the white squares if he takes my rook.
He brings this rook over here. And why would he do that?
Well, he has his rooks doubled on the b file and he puts a lot of pressure on this b pawn here. This is a bit of a waiting move, in fact. And he played his other rook to b2. And I played back. And I'm saying to him that you can't improve your position. That is, again, a small act of provocation.
So he decides to move the pawn forward.
And I brought my queen over.
Well, here, as you say, he's moving the rook around quite a lot.
Yes,
here,
that's right. That's right. He was also searching for a plan. And the knight comes attacking the rook, and at this moment he chose to remove. And I took directly.
He brings that back.
And I brought my knight back, threatening to blockade with the knight here. The knight would be very powerfully placed.
To counter that, he brings the pawn
He
forward.
opens up the position, and I take, and then he enters with the queen. This gave me an opportunity to remove an important pawn around his king, and then he crashes in on the b file. The position is becoming very dangerous for black. I was not too comfortable just at this moment, but I have some very well placed pieces.
This would be regarded as an aggressive tactic.
Yes, that's right. And the heavy pieces are swinging in towards my king. I move the rook over, hitting the queen, and rook comes down, giving a check. Goes in to the side.
No, he decides to bring the queen.
Yeah, because the queen was attacked. And now there are some ominous-looking threats. I gave a check, a sly check along this long diagonal.
So the king must move.
The king must move. And the rook comes over to give some extra protection around the king. This was a strange little move. It seems like a loss of time. And I think it was around this point that Kasparov started to drift. I was not very happy with my king here, and I decided that the safest place for it to go was up the board, which is very unusual, so I advanced.
And he brings the bishop back.
Yes, the idea of swinging the rook over this way. And I came in.
He decides to threaten your queen.
Yes. In fact, this doesn't improve matters at all. The queen merely comes to a better square.
And so he again threatens the queen.
Yes. And now the queen comes in to his position. And now the black pieces are in very threatening, they will soon be threatening the white king.
So he moves the pawn up to put your king in check.
Yes, this was a move of some desperation because I was simply able to take that one.
Now the
He
rook.
took this pawn with the rook, and I brought queen down to the back rank, pinning the bishop along the back rank. And there is only one defence to this, which allows, so it's rook c2, which allows a knight e3 check, which is again a family fork of the king, the rook and the other rook, and that will lead to mate in very few moves. So it was at this point that Kasparov resigned.
Excellent. So we've covered an awful lot of ground in a very short space of time, everything from how to lay the pieces out on the board at the beginning of a game to tactics and strategies.
Yes, so it would be very good if you can remember at least a few of these ideas, but I think the most important thing is to get some practice in. Find a friend and play some games against him or her.
Okay. Well, Nigel, thank you very much for teaching us how to play chess.
Thank you.
Video Class has a whole range of tapes covering anything from the times tables to rap and pop music to revision for GCSEs. And this is a selection of educational videos available from the Video Class range. For 5 to 9-year-olds, there is, of course, the 3 R's series covering reading, writing and arithmetic. For the same age group, we have the times tables to pop music. Video Class also covers the national curriculum for 9 to 14-year-olds with separate tapes for levels 4, 5 and 6 in both maths and English. We also have GCSE revision tapes for all levels of maths and also for English. But Video Class doesn't just cater for school-aged children. We also have a tape to help you spell well at any age or punctuate well and write a perfect letter at any age. All of these are available through leading retailers and many direct mail and mail order outlets. So if you do need any details, then please don't hesitate to write to us at Rockhopper. You'll find the address on the inside of your video sleeve.